I want us to become brothers again like we used to be, and for us to find ourselves and bond with each other. Can we agree to that?
Opinions vary.
Welcome to a bonus episode of Three Brothers Filmcast. Our conversations over the past month have got me thinking about the trends in filmmaking and cinema this past year, 2023. And I want to put forward these three trends to see what you guys think. So first, streaming seems to have short-circuited many of the previous ways that we gauge success and failure in film. And I take something like Rebel Moon, where I'm not even sure whether a film like this is a success or a failure by the new terms of how movies are made and released. So it's almost like we're inhabiting a whole new framework for production and consumption, and it's hard to gauge how things are received. That leads into, in terms of theatrical film going, I feel like Barbie and Oppenheimer have kind of exploded the dominance of the franchise model. I'm not saying the franchise model is done, but the franchise model's dominance of theatrical moviegoing, mostly emblematized by Marvel, seems to be shown that it's like that's no longer the case. You can do a movie that's not part of a franchise if you market it heavily enough. It can have related IP, and perhaps you need like a certain director's brand attached, but you can have two giant films that are not parts of franchises. And that seemed like something, 3 years ago I didn't know was possible. And then thirdly, somewhat related to the previous two, I'm kind of lamenting and not understanding that I feel like we're at a point where I don't know if you want to call it prestige or artistic or sort of festival type movies, but we're at the largest point of detachment of that world of cinema from sort of like normal cinema and movie watching and content consumption that I can like think of in my life. Where movies that are sort of like, partly because it's like a movie gets buzz 6 months previously, and then at some point it comes out. We've lost sort of the slow build. Unless you're living in New York City or LA, we've lost like a slow build in certain, theaters to bring things out. And it's gotten to a point where you're like, the big things on like sort of like, film, letterbox, a lot of them don't have any impact on regular cinema going to a larger extent than I feel like I just, for a lot of my life, some of those movies would break through, and I feel like there's a weird disconnection. So overall, I see this sort of strange turbulence, and things have shifted. We're out of the pandemic era. We're into this new era. I don't know. What do you think about those thoughts?
I think you're right about the streaming thing and how it's hard to gauge success. And I think that also ties into your last point about the disconnect between certain films getting their release and sort of picking up word of mouth and stuff like that. But some of that has to do simply with the model, the profit model that streaming companies like Netflix follow. Like Netflix we don't know how much like profit Netflix really makes. All Netflix has to do is show that increase in subscriber numbers, and and then trying to drive their stock price up. Disrupting the system the way Uber did. Whereas Paramount and Warner Brothers still have to show their shareholders that they turned a profit at the end of the year, right? Like clearly Netflix is not doing well, hence their attempts to crack down on things like account sharing and their raising of the prices constantly. They're trying, essentially they're trying to capture a certain an audience and then leave them no alternatives in a sense, right? They've tried to sort of portray themselves as the savior by, like, in the past, funding films by people like Scorsese and others, right? But I think their model is hugely disruptive to a healthy movie going climate. I'm not saying that streaming as a mode of delivery that, say, would like be like similar to what DVDs used to be isn't maybe a better way to think of it, but it's something that actually, there was an interesting piece a few months ago by the Freddie DeBoer, who he isn't always my favorite when he's writing on culture and art and stuff, but he had a really good point about how streaming has conditioned us to, and it's starting with music back in the day, conditioned us to devalue art in a certain way, right? Like Netflix taught us that we should have unlimited amount of movies of every genre for $15 a month or whatever, right? And that was never the case before in the like DVD era or even things like that, right? Like, but now that we've become accustomed to that, like people balk at paying more for movies and things like that, right? Like some of us might be paying up to $50 a month for various like streaming services and things, but like if you're that heavy of a moviegoer, did you spend $50 at Blockbuster or your local video store back in 2001 too? Possibly, so like it's just a matter of like we sort of think that we should be able to get everything. And I think that's the other aspect of the disruptive thing. But the thing is, when you have everything available to you, there was always this idea that people would want to seek out those hard to find movies, and there are movies that were really hard to find for much of my life that are now available either for rental on places like Amazon Prime and stuff, or on streaming services like Criterion or Canopy or other streaming services that serve those like harder to find films, in part because they might be cheaper to license to stream and stuff like that. But the fact is that most people, I don't think, when given everything, they don't necessarily, very few people are going to seek out difficult or more challenging works, is the impression I get. Most people are just going to binge watch their favorite series and watch blockbusters. And I mean, I'm guilty of that sometimes too. But
it's like Netflix
it just is what it is, right?
Yeah. It's not like there's obviously flaws with previous systems, but it's like Netflix has moved to just needing content, and rather than necessarily turning a profit in that traditional sense is a different. It reshapes how we can produce and consume. I don't know, Aaron. What do you think?
Yeah.
Is Marvel dead?
I don't think Marvel's dead because Guardians of the Galaxy still made a lot of money.
Yeah, you're right. Guardians is the one that kind of saved their year, right?
The fourth highest grossing year.
Fourth, third was Spider-Man.
Oh, good.
But I think there's something there because Marvel understood. I think Marvel's starting to understand that they put too much of their eggs in the streaming basket, and they treated it's the content trap, right? Where they treated all types of audiovisual entertainment as one type, and it's like, no, a TV show is not the same as a movie, and you can't expect somebody to watch a TV show to see your movie to make it to make sense. That's why Marvel's like bombed. And then you get stupid people being like, well, it's sex, isn't it? It's like, no. Captain Marvel made $1 billion. Captain Marvel made so much money. People are very excited for this female-led action movie, superhero movie led by a Oscar winner. That was not a problem. The problem is that nobody understood this movie because you had to watch multiple series to understand what's going on in this. So it's like, wait, I've seen all the Marvel movies. And it's like, well, did you also subscribe to Disney Plus and watch those 5 shows? And it's like, wait, what? I've already watched the 20 movies. Why can't you mean I can't? No, you have to watch the other shows too. It's like, when is enough?
Yeah. So
like these aren't comics. You can't expect the diehards. These are mass market and properties. And I think they're starting to fail as mass market properties at this moment because they've gone greedy.
And as they've now we're Guardians 3, and then as they've started to exhaust all of anything related to sort of the initial all the way up to Endgame, right?
Yeah,
and then any of the tail end of that, they're starting to exhaust. It's like, I'm not sure how they're going to create sort of the feeling that you need to go see like this movie.
No, absolutely. And I think, the streaming thing plays into it because the streaming thing muddies the waters of whether it's a hit. I was thinking about Leave the World Behind, which I watched, Anton, on your recommendation. I thought it was like, I like Mr. Robot a lot. It's a show I think it's pretty fascinating and very entertaining. And so I was curious about watching that movie. And the movie does have many of the hallmarks of, I think, a movie that kind of is suited for streaming because it's got these big stars. It's this very intriguing concept, and it's the kind of thing, if you watch 20 minutes, you're like, I'm kind of curious where this is going. It absorbs you in a way that if you watch it on a Thursday night, you're probably going to be like, no, I'm actually hooked on this. And the low barrier to access is is a positive in the fact that you're going to engage with it.
Yeah.
But I question what it's like. Is this movie a success? I have no idea.
Yeah.
Because it was on the top 10 for several weeks, but it's like, what does that actually mean? Netflix controls those stats. We don't know anything about it. Is this a movie that shows up in the discourse? Well, then you're on your third point where it's like the discourse is kind of detached from what people actually watch. It's the whole like TV thing where like the top 100 TV shows of the year, 80 of them are NFL games, and the other 20 are Yellowstone episodes and like NCIS.
The Yellowstone universe.
Yeah. No, but so it's like people are not the people that are the taste mass, like in charge of what our cultural attitudes are and taste and this, that, and the other aren't the ones who are engaging with the mass properties. I'm not saying people should, because, in the 80s or 90s, like people were watching just like crap sitcoms and those had 40 million people watching the episode. It doesn't mean it's actually good, and might be sacrilege, but like something like Friends is not actually a significant cultural property. It's just a popular one that's lasted a long time. It's not Seinfeld. It's not The Simpsons. It doesn't actually have any joke structure or like kind of approach to storytelling of that level that actually is influential or definitive in any aspect. It's simply like attractive, appealing actors just hanging out, and people like that cozy feeling to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the Friends was a huge hit, right? But it's like, could you have a Friends in a streaming world? Probably not.
Yeah.
And like, it's, what makes me worried is that to go back to that like thing about like the economics of streaming means that they constantly need new stuff to put on, whether it's buying up old properties like Friends or producing new content.
Like Rebel Moon.
Yeah.
So Rebel Moon's necessary just to put out as Zack Snyder's doing a movie.
But in terms
for
of like that idea of that a certain, and we can say, I'm glad that Netflix is funding certain filmmakers to make certain things. But the concern is because of the churn of content, I think there's actually even good stuff that gets buried in Netflix that nobody knows about and nobody watches. Well, that would have in a different era had maybe that festival debut and then built a little bit of word of mouth. Aaron, I'm thinking of a movie from a couple of years ago that both you and I really, really liked. I'm thinking of Ending Things, Charlie Kaufman.
Yeah.
Like that movie that's a really good movie. I'm glad that Netflix got it made, but it was completely buried. Like I talked to a friend who is a big Charlie Kaufman fan and did not know that it existed.
And that's partly because of the structure of also how you access streaming. Most of these don't have like a clear, like just sort of new release, that sort of thing. It's always right. Like the different threads are tailored to what they're trying to think that you'd want. But that's also the thing is like, it's not, Aaron, you're right. There's always been this detachment between like, sort of whatever you want to call it, but the artistic, the cultural tastemakers, etc., and then sort of like the mainstream. And that's not so much the thing. It's just that it's like it's harder to see how things can infiltrate from one to the other. So
exactly,
without like the previous sort of like, well, you'll have a festival in the fall, and then you'll build word of mouth. And then that will mean that you'll go from a limited release where you get good reviews slowly. Like now, I get all the reviews like a month before anything's even close to being watchable.
They also, there's no such thing as like bad reviews for movies anymore. It's gone the way of TV, where the vast majority, it's the like positivity creep, where everything is like bell curve is moving further to the right. I'm not saying people should be overly harsh on stuff, but like it's just be accurate, like, or not even accurate, just be consistent. Like the vast majority of movies are not amazing. They're most movies are fine. Like they're not bad, they're not good, they're just fine. Like, and when you go to Rotten Tomatoes or something and you see like most movies get like a 75% fresh, and you're like, that's absurd. Like that's silly.
Yeah,
it's obviously not the case, but it's partially out of the fact that critics nowadays aren't really critics. They're entertainment writers. They're fans. They're people who want the opportunity to get an interview with Julia Roberts is as important as reviewing the movie she stars in, right? So it's playing that game, and I understand it's a different media landscape. There's a different career landscape. People don't make money writing reviews. It's not a thing unless you're one of the major newspapers that still exist.
Yeah, handful of people out there who do that.
But it's just it's getting to that point where it's very difficult to like gauge what is success, whether it's critically, whether it's commercially, and even on a commercial level where it's like where you know the studio is like, we need to make $900 million for this to be a success. It's like,
yeah,
that's absurd. Like, you didn't spend $900 million. Like, what are you talking about? And it's like, well, we need to blah, 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 blah. You just trust us. We need that much. It's like, oh, okay. Like, none of it is clear. None of it's transparent. It's all very silly. But it is a changing landscape. And even movies like Killers of the Flower Moon and stuff, like, it's one of those movies that you would only get in the streaming era, right?
Yep.
It would have never been made in the past, and there's
or at least the way it
was made. And there's aspects that are good because it allows a level of like creative freedom and the decision making behind the way to tell the story, the length of the story, the certain like viewpoint on it. But then there's like other things where it's just like, do even great directors need a little bit of a fire under them as being like, this has to be a hit for it to justify itself? And it's a thing that Akira Kurosawa always talked about, where people would be like, oh, you know, all these great American directors would come up to him and be like, I love this movie. I love that movie. And he's like, you loved it. It was a failure. It made no money. Nobody saw it. And they'd be like, no, but it's a great artistic achievement. And he's like, I don't think you understand. It's like movie making is a business. Like, I have to justify my ability to make another movie. Like, why would somebody just give me money to make a movie? That's absurd. I have to justify it.
You know who does understand that? James Cameron.
Yeah, Cameron does. No, but like, I love Scorsese. I love Spielberg. I love these guys. But even in this modern day, there is that kind of question of being like, actually, you don't just deserve to make any movie you want. Like, you have to justify it.
I think the past, like, I don't know, what year was West Side Story?
2021.
2 years ago.
2021?
Yeah.
December. Yeah. So, okay. So I feel like, you know, the past 2-3 years, a lot of my favorite directors now have entered sort of, like, they're in their late stage, but like, I really feel that like Spielberg, Scorsese, they're not on touch with like the moment anymore. And I can just feel it. Like, you know, I like Killers of the Flower Moon. I don't love it, but you're like, this movie's like not in sync with sort of like our time anymore. I'm not saying it's a movie made for the past. If anything, both the latest Spielberg and Scorsese actually feel a little bit awkward, because it's like someone who's older trying to make something that they think will hit sort of the way things are today. And you're like, so like now it's, you know, again, to give credit to Nolan, but you're just like, Oppenheimer to me is just an example of like, Nolan right now is in total command of like how to deliver to the audiences right now. And
yeah,
like, it's not to say like I still love those directors, but they're not on that platform.
But he's the only director. Maybe Villeneuve is getting there.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, we'll see what Dune Part 2 is going to also
Nolan
be a big test of
is for my
ability.
students at university in film class. Nolan is what 20 years ago Steven Spielberg was.
Yeah, and Tarantino's the
name
other.
they go to.
Yeah,
Tarantino's the new Scorsese.
If Tarantino ever makes that movie.
Oh, he's good. No, he does.
I would say those are pretty good comps. Nolan as Spielberg and Tarantino as Scorsese.
No, but in terms of commercial appeal, people need to understand. People need to shift their criteria or their like way of understanding what is the director that is synonymous with commercial success. It's not Spielberg anymore. It's James Cameron. Like, if you're going to talk about the guy who's just like guaranteed to make a hit, it's James Cameron. He's never missed.
Yeah,
right?
Ever.
And he is a guy who still is in touch with what audiences want.
Despite claims that he doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. Despite protestation.
No. But the difference
is
gnashing
of teeth.
He actually isn't trying to chase what
no,
other
he's
people
not.
want. he knows what you want deep down.
No. He knows what you
in your
need.
dream.
He knows
What you need exactly. Like no, like there is a
Avatar's
certain
the
thing where it's like,
blockbuster that you need. Yeah.
yeah.
He's gonna heal the world
No, but
one
like
avatar
he's
at a
not
time.
pandering. He's just like, I'm gonna just make it so good that you will like it, and you will, I was explaining to students today, like, go back and like watch Titanic. I said, if you've never seen it, you need to go watch this movie and understand how you can make a film that is a very traditional, cliched genre piece, period, and also keep someone's attention 100% and emotionally engage them fully, because not everything has to be, subverting and doing crazy things to work in that level. But it's you have to have an intense amount of confidence to do that.
Absolutely. And it's a shifting world. Like it's a shifting cinematic landscape. New things will present themselves in coming years, but I think we're in that like transitional phase where a new rule hasn't really presented itself. And I think people are looking at Barbie and Oppenheimer and they're like, this is a potential way forward, but I don't think we can guarantee that is the way forward.
No, they would require, like, I think those movies, like, so individual director brand is key. And then also like Barbie hit on something, yes, but Barbie also.
But I don't think you can just go make another toy movie. It's not going to work without those actors.
It's
and
the combination of
Gerwig,
the combination of pop culture,
novelty,
and sort of political stuff. All that sort of stuff was reading the moment well. But the thing about Barbie that is probably understated is just that Barbie, it was also a product of marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Like Barbie would not be successful if the people who marketed it hadn't, they super saturated it. I hadn't seen a movie where there wasn't a movie in years where every single kind of like mainstream publication or news show or magazine or whatever had like a Barbie thing. Like that saturation, it's basically like, it was like the
90s,
almost like Force Awakens was the last time there was like something where it's just like everywhere. So, in the amount of, again, like the amount of money, like Barbie obviously made a profit, but you're like, it's very unclear how much they spent to make Barbie.
Yeah. The other thing I'm curious about Barbie is, does it show that there's still a space for like actors that people like? Because I don't think that film also hits without Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling somehow in those roles. I mean, maybe you could have other actors, but like the actors that you chose were really important there, because unlike other like superheroes or even characters in those kind of franchises, like Ken and Barbie are kind of blank slates, right? Like literally they're toys that kids project their like imagination onto, so you really need
they're smooth.
Right. Yeah. So you needed to have actors who could capture people's like attention and imagination. You needed intensely like classic movie stars, intensely beautiful people who also can do acting and personality,
and they're funny
in those roles. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like they have personality. They're
and well managed also stars through the media networks building up.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
so I don't know. Maybe we'll have a return of stars.
Yeah, but like, there's the interesting question: is like, is the Barbie Oppenheimer thing a potential return to a more classic Hollywood idea of where you have your like auteur director who has he does his weighty themes about pertinent topics to the day of Oppenheimer, and then you have your like charismatic, beautiful movie stars with a pop confection. That's your other hit, right? And that is the way it used to be. And however much, I think Barbie's fine. I don't love it or anything. I don't hate it either. But it's one of those movies where it's like, I would be very happy if we got more Barbies than more movies like that. Not saying more movies about toys, but movies that approach entertainment like Barbie did, than more movies trying to be the next Marvel or trying to be the next Star Wars or whatnot. It might be a possible way forward. But we all know Dune 2. It all rests on Dune 2.
He who controls the spice controls the universe.
Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Goodbye, Mr. Bond.
I bid you farewell.